Hey everybody, I wanted to share with you a project that I have just completed using the Love Made from Scratch recipe from my website to give you some ideas of some ways that with the bridal season and wedding showers coming up of how you can make a really sweet wedding gift for a bride in your family. What I did was I went to my website and downloaded the Love Made from Scratch recipe, and I used Publisher to print out my recipe. And to get the idea of and to the size of the page that I needed, because this is going to be the frame that the final product's going to be put in, and to be able to get the page size to match and fit perfectly here within this opening, what I did was I took one of the mats that was inside of the frame to try to get my dimensions. Now this mat is pre-cut for a 5x3 picture, but we're not actually we want our piece to be the full length, so it'll cover the whole backspace of the frame. So what I did was, using my super duper handy little Stanley measuring tape, just got the measurements for my mat, and that's 10 inches in length and 5 inches in width. So I went into my page settings in Publisher and did customize page and put in 10 by 5, and it gave me the size that I needed to work on. Now I've already pre-cut the actual recipe out, and so this is how the recipe is going to look after you print it. Now once you print it out on the page, one thing I do, because I don't cut very straight, is before I print, I actually put a border around, a heavy thick line black border around on the page, so when it prints out I have that box and I can use that the border as a guide to get a good nice straight cut on my paper. Now another thing too, in doing the layout of the recipe, one thing I do recommend is not to try to do it all in one text box. I used about 4 different text boxes when I was laying out this recipe. The word love is in its own independent text box. I used loose spacing to put a little bit more spacing on the word love to make it stretch out a little bit better. And I used a kind of a really pretty script font for love. And then I did the Made from Scratch. Now the From is a special font that I found. Pinterest is awesome. It has a lot of great ideas for fonts and things, and I went on to Pinterest and dug around for special types of fonts that would give me this From, and it actually matches the From the title on the book cover. And that same font gave me some pretty little squirrely font to put in between the ingredients, and also to make a separator between the ingredients and the directions. The ingredients is in a text box of their own, and then I did the divider between the ingredients and the description or the directions for the recipe in those 3 little squirrely fonts, or in their own independent text box, and then I did another text box just for the instructions alone. That way you can manipulate and manage the placement of the words onto your work area on Publisher and make things look really nice and even and spaced and in alignment, and you're not fighting with just one text box to get it to work. And also you know, it just gives you a lot more freedom to work on the layout and design of how you place the print on the page. Now, to get the background, now this is not the actual background that I use for the finished product, but again, I went over to the scrapbook section in Hobby Lobby, and I found this piece right here, fell in love with it because it has a good vintage romantic feel to it. And since our frame has a little bit of a shabby chic design to it, or feel to it as well, I figured this would make a really pretty romantic background. As you can see, I've already cut for the final product this piece, but I didn't want to use the cut from this piece for this demonstration, because I'll probably use this piece for another project and need a little bit different size. So when you get ready to cut your piece out, which is to the background, which is what the black part here is being used for. And I'll go ahead and just do this to show you how to get a good even cut for that background. Again, I don't cut that well, so I always try to do as minimum cuts as I have to do. So what I do is, well, I'll just use this so you can see it a little bit better, is, again, I took this piece here to get my measurements. And when I was working on getting the measurements for this black piece, I put the insert from the frame right on the edges, see? So therefore, you only need to do 2 cuts. Now, to make sure that I have good even lines, I took a marker, and purple's my favorite color. I always try to sign my books in the color purple. And I drew along these edges here and tried to make sure that I'm even with the edge of the page, and I was not even when I made that first draw. There we go. So let's get that even up. Now I'm going to put an asterisk right beside that line so I know that that's the line I need to follow if I did the cut. Now if I was actually going to cut this piece, then as you can see I have my guides here to go ahead and cut this piece. But I'm not going to cut this piece because, like I said, I may want to use it for, I've got some smaller mats that I want to use some of that for a background, and it's going to be a different size. So once I get the background cut from the paper that I'm going to use for the background, and I get my recipe cut out, then you can use either hot glue, double-sided tape, or glue dots. Now I usually like double-sided tape or glue dots. I don't really like to use a hot glue gun because hot glue guns do tend to get a little bit messy and they get stringy. To affix your recipe to your background paper. Now you want to also make sure that this is centered, and again you want to get your handy dandy little measure out, and that can be a ruler or seamstress tape or this, you know, regular measuring tape. And then you want to take, and once you place your paper on, measure out and make sure you're center and square with your background piece. Because the last thing you want to do is get all this put together, put it in your frame, and then find that you're off center or your recipe card is not straight. I'm sorry, my brain went blank on me. Now, another wonderful thing about the scrapbook section in Hobby Lobby is you can find these wonderful little borders that are self-adhesive. And the piece that I picked off, and always when you're buying to use these for the borders on any project, at least buy 2 to 3 packets, because depending on how big of the piece that you're going to actually be using these to border, one is not going to be long enough in length, and it took 2 packets of this to do the final project for the strip that I used. And the strip that I chose from this selection of borders was this little piece right here. And I really like that because it seemed to match some of the decorative font I had used in the printing of the recipe. Now once you get your recipe card attached to the background paper that you're using, then you can go along and trim out this piece, kind of give it a mitered, finished look. Now when you're working with a piece of ribbon and you're getting to the corners, instead of cutting the corner straight up, just cut it at a little mitered angle. Just give it a little bit of angle. That way in your next piece you'll cut in the opposite direction. That way it gives a nice mitered finished look to the piece that you're framing out. Now once the piece is completely framed out and you've got it attached, then you're ready to put it into the decorative frame. And this is where you're going to get to see the final project. And this was the final project. I used a piece of textured pink cardstock. And again, I found this over in the scrapbook section of Hobby Lobby. I like the texture of the cardstock because it just gives a little bit more of a textured feel to the overall picture. As you can see, I framed it all the way around on 4 sides, so it just gives it a nice polished finished look. And then and this is actually the foam backing that was in the frame, so, and that kind of helps give it a little bit more of a 3D feel. Now, one thing you have to be careful about, and I have to really remind myself a lot when I'm working on projects, is not to get wild and crazy with a lot of embellishments. Sometimes simplicity goes a long way. So, you know, you get to looking at all the pretty stickers and things, and you think, oh, this will look good if I add this here and here and there, and then the next thing you know, you've kind of overdone it. So just the paper and the pretty texture cardstock paper and the border, the embellished border, is all I did for this piece. Now I'm going to take and put it in the frame. And if you don't have time to actually paint a frame and get a frame and paint it, again, Hobby Lobby is a great place. I got this frame at Hobby Lobby, and if you watch their sales, they run their frames 50% off, and you can get some really, really pretty frames for half the price, and make some really, really pretty projects, and you don't have a lot of time invested in it, because I know all of us are always so busy with our lives. I mean, we're always going in 50 million directions, and sometimes we just want to make something really pretty, but can't exactly build it from the ground up. So sometimes we need to, as Ethel will say with a little bit of a grimace, sometimes you have to use that box cake mix to make the cake. All right, so this is what the finished products look like, and with the frame and the background paper and everything, it has a really pretty feel to it, a really nice romantic feel, and it's something that the bride can display in her home, in her new home, and in all those times when, and we've all had them, those of us that have been married a while, when you have those days when you just really, really, you know, want to kind of pitch a fit about something, or you just get real frustrated because they don't pick their clothes up out of the floor, or they leave dishes in the sink, or you know, they'll call you, tell you they're going to be late getting home from work. You know, you can always just kind of go by and read this little recipe as a daily reminder that, you know, these are some of the great ingredients from the letter that Paul wrote to the Corinthians about things that love is, which is where a lot of this recipe came from. So anyway, again, I hope this is giving you guys some great ideas on some wonderful gifts. Over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be bringing in some more crafts that I've done using this recipe. Just remember, it's always available on my website. You have to go to the bookstore to download it. It is going to ask you for your email address so we can send you the PDF download, and the link's good for 72 hours. And also, just to remind you, Love Made from Scratch is now available in softcover and in Kindle version on Amazon. And we'll see you guys Thursday night at the Backstory with Tori Bailey. And until then, have a great day.